Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be starting Chapter 8, which deals with training human resources. Now, there's a difference between training and development. Today we're going to be, and this week we're going to be looking at the concept of training. You know, you're only as good as the people who support you. Training plays a very pivotal role in people's ability to be able to support the organization. So let's take a look today at this important element of human resources, and that's training. Okay, well, welcome back, everybody, and today we're going to begin Chapter 8, which is Training Human Resources. Now, what is training? Well, it's important to understand that training is different from development. Oftentimes you hear training and development with departments, but training is a separate entity unto itself. Training, as you see here, is the process whereby people acquire capabilities to perform jobs. You're just getting them adept to whatever position or whatever job responsibility they may have. Now, organizational strategy and training is a little more comprehensive when you're looking at a training program. You're dealing with strategic training. What skills or knowledge, abilities, and other attributes are going to be necessary for these individuals, these employees, to be able to perform their jobs. And if you're going to have strategic training, you have to invest in training. And this is where a lot of companies fall short. They look at training as maybe taking someone under your wing and showing them how to do the job, and then that's it. But there's nothing comprehensive about it. But training really requires an investment in time, resources, capital. So there has to be those elements going into a comprehensive training program. Then you have organizational competitiveness. How can that organization compete with rivals in any given industry? Well, we're learning today that one of the ways that we can outperform our competition is to have better, well-rounded, more adept employees working for us. So we have the organizational mandate. If we're going to compete, we have to have our people trained appropriately. And then global competitiveness. And when we take a look at global competitiveness, what we're taking is a macro approach to training, because these organizations are going to have to compete with companies who really have an advantage over us because they don't have the legislation, the laws, the requirements. They don't have to deal with unions. So we're going to have to do more with less and still be able to outcompete and outperform our global competitors. Now, strategic training, let's go back to it, and I'll just outline all of them at once. Strategic training can add value that simple training cannot. Simple training would be a matter of just, here's how to do the job. Strategic training is knowing what's going to be required of that individual in the future and being able to adjust your development of that individual accordingly. Also, you help reduce the thinking that training alone can solve most problems. Solving most problems does not come with just fixing the problem or addressing the deficiency. What you have to look at is the need for that person to be able to think through problems and so forth. There is a concept that we teach called single and double loop learning. Now, single loop learning is just addressing the issue and finding a solution for it. Double loop learning is going back and finding cause and effect relationships that bring about the need for correction or training and so forth. For instance, if you have a light bulb that goes out, single loop learning is just to go and replace the light bulb. Well, if it blows out again in a week and you just apply single loop learning, you're just going to go and find another light bulb and replace it. But you're really not correcting any long-term deficiency. Double loop learning would go back and let's investigate why these light bulbs are burning out the way they are. So you're looking for cause and effect relationships. And strategic training helps to facilitate that in a way, in as much as it is preparing people not just to think about what's needed right now, but to think about cause and effect relationships that will occur down the line that you're going to have to address. And you can assess whether training can actually address issues. There may be other things going on with the individual. There may be behavioral issues. There may be cognitive issues that the individual is going through that you would have to address, but maybe not from a training standpoint. And you're assessing what else can be done. And this is what we call CI, continuous improvement. You're always looking for ways to be able to improve upon what you are currently doing. So this is from the standpoint of strategic training, the elements that you have to consider. Now, investing in training. Now, unfortunately, training is not a priority with most organizations. It's starting to become that. But right now, when you go into training and development in HR, for instance, when it comes time for budget cuts, they're one of the first departments to be eradicated because they don't see, organizations really don't see at this point the need for training because it takes a while to reap results. We want immediate results for our investment. So other company or other departments within a company would be able to facilitate that, but training and development is something that is a long-term investment. You have to put in the time, the effort, the money, and so forth, and in time you'll see the results of it and reap the benefits. But they're not immediate, and because you don't get immediate returns, oftentimes training and development initiatives are swept to the side. But here are some stats on this. Employee training encompasses, they say about a little over 30 hours per year, which isn't a whole lot when you think about it. In the course of a person's tenure at a company, 31 and a half hours really do not comprise a significant portion of a person's being able to perform and to be able to improve their performance in an organization. You also have a cost of around $1,200 per employee and 2% of cost of payroll. So you can see here by these low numbers how much of a priority training is when it comes to organizations. Now, training can lower employee turnover. The more adept the person becomes, the more they're going to feel like they're a contributor. Their morale, their self-worth will increase, and hopefully, if you get the right results from it, they will want to stay with the company. It can also improve effectiveness and productivity, and that's the bottom line. Even though it may take an investment up front, the overall achievement of that person once they are trained and they are developing will reap all types of rewards. It does reduce costs. And what you see here is the learning curve advantage. As a person learns, they're costing the company money because they don't know the best way of being able to handle situations and issues and so forth. So during this learning curve, while they're learning to do the job, they are wasting. They're wasting time, resources, and so forth. You have other people who have to go from their job to help this person out to get them qualified or trained. So it's costing the company money at the very beginning. However, once they are trained and they have gone through the learning cycle, then they start to produce. And then that's when they become more of an asset and they start reducing the cost of operations. You also improve quality and customer service, and if you notice today, customer service is a very big priority within organizations because they are trying to keep the customer coming back. So instead of just making a sale Companies are trying to develop long-term relationships with them so they can get repeat business. So the employees have to be trained in that, and they also have to understand the importance of quality. So there are other management practices such as Six Sigma and total quality management that address quality, but all of those fall under the umbrella of training. And it increases human capital, and this is really the focus of HR right now, is to leverage human capital. That's the efforts of the people, and once you have that attained, then you can go on to be a productive and efficient organization. Now let's move on to organizational competitiveness. If employees are not continually trained, they may fall behind and the company could become less competitive. And that just goes without saying. Today, because of diversity, globalization, and technology, companies have to stay on the cutting edge. They have to stay in the forefront. People like Microsoft and Google and all of these high-tech companies, if they're not in front, then they're going to fall by the wayside, and there's really not a whole lot of room for many people to stay in these industries anymore. I recently discovered where Kroger is starting to lay off managers because Amazon, of all people, is bringing in competition. And who would have thought that this grocery store would have to really compete with something like Amazon? But it's happening. As technology is becoming more prevalent in society, organizations that would normally not venture out into new endeavors are doing that all the time now. So you have to keep people up to date on what's going on. They can't fall behind, because if they fall behind, the company's going to fall behind. And if the company falls behind, they're not going to be in business very long. So what do we have as a result of that? Well, we have knowledge management, and that's the way an organization identifies and leverages knowledge to be competitive. We're no longer in the industrial age. We are in the information age now. So knowledge is key if companies are going to be able to compete in the 21st century and even beyond, if the Lord tarries. So we need to leverage our knowledge. That means our information, our intelligence, our data, and so forth. And who better to be able to do that than the people who are working for you? Performance and training must be integrated to be effective. So all of this knowledge management, information systems, and so forth, and the cognitive and emotional, even in some cases, have to be integrated into your training to make you a better performer. And then finally, sales training is key in main industries, and that really is true. Nothing happens until something is sold. So sales training, which is one of the most expensive parts of your operation, have to be trained. They have to understand that there's more to it than just the sale. There's that customer service that we talked about earlier. They have to be able to develop relationships and so forth. So sales training is key if companies are going to be competitive. Now, linking strategies and training. And Figure 8.2 kind of gives you a visual depiction of what we're talking about here. First of all, you have your organizational strategies. One of them may be to increase sales. You may want to expand into overseas markets, or develop a new product line, or acquire your competitor, a rival within an industry, and so forth. So you have the strategy here that starts it all off. Well, let's try to move on with increased sales. We'll use that as the example. So if our strategy is to increase sales, then we need necessary outcomes to implement those strategies. So one of those outcomes may be to identify key elements and train sales force. That goes without saying. If you're going to increase sales, you need more salesmen or women who are good at what they do, but you need to develop them. Let's say also that you need to train production and sales on new products. Knowing the product is a large part of the challenge to sales. If you know the product well enough, you can sell it. And from there, let's go to training activities. So we have the strategy, we have the outcomes that we want to accomplish, and then the training activities. Well, what would we do here to be able to increase our sales? Well, let's see. We may try performance consulting or design training. We want to do that. Intercultural competence, language training. We may not do that if we want to stay local. But let's say here, new product training, that's essential. Production practice, sales simulations, that would be an excellent training activity. And then onboarding and corporate culture training. So that would be an important aspect of it because it gives the salesperson an idea of what the company is about, what they value, what they would expect out of this individual. So you see here the linkage, and that's all you're doing. You're going step by step from the strategy to the outcomes to the method by which you're going to meet those strategic objectives and so forth. Now, global competitiveness, we've talked about this in the past. We talked about global assignment training, which deals with expatriates and how difficult it is to keep them overseas because they get homesick and the cultural shock. So you need a comprehensive training program to be able to really enculturate them, get them assimilated into that culture, and doing that will increase the likelihood that they will be able to stay for however long you need them over there. But there is some training that you can accomplish through intercultural competence training to help them. There's a cognitive, there's an emotional, there's a behavioral aspect of it. And then multinational operations means companies will be dealing with workers, customs, and suppliers from different cultures. So, yeah, a multinational organization, let's say Shell Oil, they deal with different customs, different cultures, different values and beliefs as they are a multinational corporation. So each country has different expectations and demands, and you have to meet those. So think about how complex and how complicated some of these training programs can be to make sure that the people we send over there to manage them are going to be not only proficient in the job, but to be able to stay for the long haul. Now, Figure 8.3 talks about the three components that we mentioned a few minutes ago. You do have the cognitive here, which is the cultural specific training. You may go through primarily language courses, but you also want to get the cultural and customs of that country that is going to be receiving you. There was a incident, it's been back some years ago, where a young man threw gum on the sidewalk in one of these Asian countries. I don't know if it was Indonesia or wherever, but that was against the law, and as a result, they caned him, which is they took a bamboo cane and really spanked him in public, and it was very brutal. That's one of the punishments that they incorporate overseas for people who violate, I guess, what we would consider to be misdemeanors. They just incorporated corporal punishment. And the company was up in arms, the State Department was up in arms, but ultimately they said, you're in our country now, so you have to go by our traditions and customs and laws. And that's very difficult because some countries do not let you get away with the things that we get away with here. But there's also the emotional side of it, and that's dealing with the social skills that are needed. In some countries, they are very lax when it comes to business. Some are very formal and traditional. Some value the work hours that we observe here in America, 8-hour work days, 5 days a week. There's some cultures that prefer to be with their family, so they may work 4 or 5 hours and that's it, and spend the rest of the time with their families. So you have those social skills that you need to adjust to. Any prejudices that you may have against people of color or different cultures, you have to take care of. Communication skills. There are some things that you can do here in America that would be considered an offense to others. If you receive a business card in Japan, they expect you to hold out both hands and cradle it and not put it just in your pocket. They want you to hold on to it until they leave. That's a sign of respect and so forth. But just something as simple as that can get you in trouble if you're not careful. And then the behavioral side of it, and that's culture, assimilation, international projects, social skills training. All of these can help you to better prepare for those assignments that are going to be overseas that you're going to have to go over and work in for any extended period of time. So the more comprehensive that training is, the better off you're going to be. Now, training in human resources, when it comes to legal issues and training, you have to be very fair with people who you select. You can't single anybody out. The training needs to be job related and nothing else. You have training contracts, which is kind of like an agreement. This will be what we're going to cover, and this is what you're expected to receive out of it. Compensation for training outside of work hours, even if you have a weekend workshop or getaway, the people are there for your company. So you have to make sure that they are going to be given some type of remuneration for that. There's also OSHA, which is Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or agency, which they have different training requirements for safety issues and so forth. That's mandated by law. And equal employment opportunity laws you've got to maintain and uphold. Now, there are more legal issues. You have the training, design, and delivery. And that's the criteria and practices used to select individuals. You need to make sure, again, that you're not singling people out and that it's given to everybody equally. And employees working overtime, you have to compensate them, and requiring signing of training contracts. And again, most training that I've been through, you just sign a piece of paper with your name, and that just proves that you were there as a part of it. But you should be given some type of compensation for it because it is company business. Now, here are just some types of training that you can use at your disposal. They're legally required types of training, which again is like OSHA or EEO. You have basic and remedial skills, which may be just core types of programs. You have job and technical training, which deals more with just the hardcore skills that you're going to need. For instance, equipment operations, or IT and technical training and so forth. And then you have the soft skills, and the soft skills are the interpersonal skills. It may be ethics, how to get along in teams and conflict. And when you see these job announcements today, most of them are asking for these types of skills here that go beyond just the bachelor's degree or the education and the specific job requirements. They're looking for people who will fit the organization. So you have that person job match, but also you have the person organization match that is just as important, and that's what we're seeing here. Those skills that are going to make you better suited for that company culture. Well, that's all we have for today, and then we'll continue on tomorrow as we go into a little bit more detail when it comes to training. Well, class, today we took a look at the investment in training and how much money and time it takes to train people, and it being one of the reasons why many companies don't invest as much into training. We also took a look at some of the core elements of training, especially when it comes to cultural training. And we saw that there's a cognitive, there's an emotional, and there's a behavioral aspect to this type of training. Training involves many, many things today. It's more than just taking a person, putting them in a classroom, and giving them instruction. There are so many dimensions today as we try to accommodate diversity, technology, and globalization. So today, I hope that you've gotten a good exposure to the very beginning ideas of training, and tomorrow we'll carry on and go a little bit more in depth with it. Until then, we'll see you later.